Skepticism is more than an attitude. It's an effort, and it's a path to free will. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I thought I'd do another presentation on skepticism this time. I feel like that skepticism is an art form that has been lost. I feel like skepticism is a pillar of our community, a pillar of our lifestyle that has been set aside in favor of mantra. I feel like skepticism is not being practiced at all by our skeptical movement. And I want to just talk about it. And, I did get some feedback. I want to just talk a little bit about the feedback, but I did get some feedback from the other, from the last presentation I did, that my last one was a little bit too long. This one I'm going to try and keep shorter. I'm going to get right into it. But before I do, while I'm talking about feedback, I just want to say thank you to all of you who are commenting on these videos. I'm reading every comment. I know some of you have been with me for a very long time, and I so appreciate that. And I also wanted to mention that I got a lot of what I'll call constructive criticism about my Dillahunty video. A lot of people saying that I should have tried harder to take the high road. I wanted to say thank you for that. I appreciate that. No, actually, I wanted to say you're anti-Semites for calling me out on my bullshit. You're anti-Semites. You're haters, and something like that. No, actually, I do appreciate the feedback. I am trying to become a better person. I put an honest effort into taking the high road for that video, and I was not able to do it. But still, I got from that video, I got a lot of support, and I got a lot of constructive criticism for saying, try and do better, try and keep reaching for that high road. So folks, please keep telling me to do that. Please keep encouraging me to reach higher, and I will do the same for you. Now let's talk a little bit about skepticism. I wanted to bring in what I'm going to be doing today. So I'm going to begin today by talking about what is skepticism and why it's not just advisable but mandatory in every day. It is not something that skepticism is not something that I take lightly. It is not something that that anybody should take lightly, ever, in my opinion. How to do skepticism, or I should say how I do skepticism now in 2023. I'm not going to tell you all the ways to do skepticism. This is a short presentation, not a long one. I could do a doctoral thesis on this stuff, but the purpose of this presentation is just to remind people of what skepticism is and how it's done. Some places, I'll finish out where some places where you might want to visit your skepticism, where this might be useful for you. But before I get into that, let's go into what is skepticism, and let's describe it. Skepticism, a noun, a doubting or questioning attitude or state of mind. But this is wrong, okay? Skepticism is not an attitude, and it is not a state of mind. Skepticism is a process. It's a process for maximizing the likelihood that you are correct. It's not something where you go, and you doubt. Skepticism is something that you do. When you do skepticism, you actually engage the process. It's a verb. Skepticism is a verb. Being skeptical takes actions, not attitudes, okay? It's not something that you can just decide. Skepticism is something that you do. It's an action that you take. Now, it's important to understand that skepticism includes due process and freedom of speech and freedom of the press, and among other things. Due process is an incarnation of skepticism. It's how you do skepticism. You take it through a process. Is this real? Free speech, free press, debate. Is this real? This is how you engage ideas. So skepticism takes effort. Skepticism takes time. And frankly, skepticism is not always easy. In fact, the search for truth is never easy. There are people out there lying or wrong everywhere. And this is why skepticism is absolutely mandatory all the time. Your leaders and your politicians on both sides lie to you, or they're wrong. But mostly they lie to you. They all have their opinions. They all have their objectives. No side is is immune from this. Podcasters lie because they seek clicks, so they sensationalize. Newspapers, they sensationalize their articles. Losers seeking respect and publicity. Remember this lady? Losers seeking respect and publicity for their IMDb page or whatever, their acting career. They might want to do anything. These are bad actors, and the bad actors are everywhere, and this is one of the reasons that you need skepticism. Another one is tribalists. And tribalists are everywhere these days. And tribalists, what do? Tribalists are anti-skeptical. So whatever they say, they haven't applied skepticism. They might be sure, but they haven't applied skepticism. So they're not sure. They just think they're sure. So your search for truth can never truly be one side from one source or one side. You cannot use one source on one side as a skeptical source. In order to be skeptical, you have to get something from both sides. Listening to one side is just listening to propaganda. It is the opposite of skepticism to listen to one side. Skepticism is a muscle. You have to exercise it or you will lose it. Now, atrophy of skepticism muscles leads to cognitive dissonance, right? If you're not doing skepticism, your brain is going to notice that things aren't right. So you're going to be stuck in this place of cognitive dissonance. This is why so many religionists and wokeists get angry and lash out when you challenge them, because that lack of skepticism creates a cognitive dissonance, and cognitive dissonance creates that violent reaction when you challenge it. So when you follow blindly, ignoring skepticism, you lose free will. You lose your own free will by limiting your own knowledge and giving that free will to the source of your information. Okay? If who will control you with that information. Suddenly, you're unwillingly angry about fake stuff, distracted from real problems. So let's say you listen to a leader and the leader says, those guys over there are bad, and you just say, okay, those guys over there are bad. I'm going to pick up a gun and go shoot those guys. And you go shoot those guys, and because they're bad, but you haven't actually done the skepticism to see if they're bad. So what if you're the bad guys? Well, now you're an unwitting approval. You're an unwilling accomplice in a crime that you didn't want to do. You're a good person. You wanted to be good. You wanted to do good. Everybody wants to do good. But they're getting information and they're being controlled by that information. And by not doing skepticism, you are being controlled by that information. By doing skepticism, you're exercising your option to have free will. When you have one source of information, yeah, you can determine, you still have the free will to say, I'm going to do that or I'm not going to do that. But it's skewed, man, because you're basing knowledge off of a different set, off of a non-complete set of information. You don't have real free will. You have an impeded free will. You have an impacted free will, a guided will, as it were. And that's not the way that I want to live. That's not the way a lot of people want to live. So this is about how I do skepticism. Again, there's just so much I could talk about in this presentation. I could make this presentation 2 hours long easily. I really could. I just want to just start the conversation. This is going to be an incomplete list. One chart on how I do skepticism. The first thing is I listen to both sides from both sides. Do not only listen to your side, talk about the other side. That is the opposite of skepticism. That is just propaganda. Why? Because your side lies. Okay? No matter who you are, your side lies. A good example here is Kyle Rittenhouse. If you hate Kyle Rittenhouse, you didn't watch the trial. Okay? I remember doing the skepticism, watching the trial, and then watching the trial and seeing this kid who said, before he was shot by BLM protesters, he actually gave medical aid to those BLM protesters. And there was a moment where I was watching the protest, and he was talking about how he was giving aid to BLMers. And I flipped over to MSNBC, and there was a woman there talking about how Kyle Rittenhouse took a gun across state lines to go hunt black people. It's crazy how skewed the news is and how much they lie. Election rigging on the other side. Election rigging is the same thing. My goodness, you get those Republicans talking about rigged elections, you're going to get talked about a lot. And you need to actually look at both sides. Where's the election rigged? I don't think it was. I did look at both sides. Did I delve into it deeply? No. But I have a good enough opinion because I looked from both sides to say, no, the election wasn't rigged. Now, Trump and the Paris Accord. I wanted to bring this up. I was on a podcast with Javier, and I was on with a couple other people. This one guy, he said Donald Trump pulled out of the Paris Accord because he hates the environment. What a stupid thing to say, right? That is what MSNBC and CNN were saying, but it was a stupid thing to say. Do you think Donald Trump literally said, yeah, fuck the air. I'm gonna kill the air because I'm evil and I'm orange and I want to make everybody stop breathing. Do you actually think that? No, actually. The reason he pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord was actually pretty good. He figured that the other countries were not pulling their weight. We were hurting ourselves. And by the way, other countries that weren't involved in the Paris Accord were killing the planet anyway, so we were killing ourselves for no reason. We were hurting ourselves. He pulled out of the Paris Accords. Had you listened to what he said instead of what his opponents said, you would have had a very much better understanding of both sides. You wouldn't be on a podcast screaming that Donald Trump hates the environment. And that's why he did that. That's it. I hope I'm getting this example out well. It is imperative that you hear from the other side what they say from their lips so that you can criticize them from yours. You cannot criticize, you cannot say that you have done skepticism if you don't do this thing. If you don't hear both sides from both sides, you have not started doing skepticism. And when I say talk to both sides, I mean actively listen to and read the other side. I have books from religious groups. I have books. I've read White Fragility. I've read New Jim Crow. I've read a bunch of books that are religious. I've read Roy Comfort. I've read, is it Ray Comfort or Roy Comfort? I read Dinesh D'Souza. I read Frank Turek. This is how I have power. This is how I have knowledge. I could have just gone to the AA chat boards, the American Atheist chat boards, and said, hey, what do you all think of Frank Turek? And they all would have said, hey, he's an idiot. He thinks he's a, they would come up with all the answers that atheists would come up for Frank Turek. And then I could take that and go into debate Frank Turek, right? That wouldn't do well. The way you do that is by not listening to your own side talk about the other side, but by actively going in, listening to and reading the other side. The other side thinks they're doing good. Why? Why did they think what they're doing is good? When Trump pulled out of the Paris Accord, he thought he was doing good. No, he wasn't wringing his hands, I'm going to destroy the environment. Blah. He thought he was doing good. Why? Why did he think he was doing good? You need to understand that if you're going to criticize him. Evaluate the delta between what they say about themselves and what the other side says about them. So what is the difference between what one side says about the other side versus what that side says about themselves? There's a huge difference in those facts. And that delta is the amount of lies that you're getting from this side, okay? Or this side. I mean, both sides will lie about each other. I mean, they'll both lie about themselves. But you'll be able to really hear the lies that each of them are telling when you're listening to both sides talk for themselves. Now, there's one more exercise that I like to do whenever I am in question about my own personal beliefs, and that is to try to prove myself wrong and fail. This is how I do skepticism. I've done this many times. I sit down, I have an opinion, I say, okay, if I were the prosecuting attorney and I was going to try and prove me wrong on the stand, what would I do? And then I do that research. I prepare like a prosecuting attorney to find the other side of my argument. What is the other side? If I were going to take the other side, what would I do? So let's say I was going to take the side of religion. I would try and defeat my atheism by proving religion. So what would I do? I would take out the Bible. I would take out the other books. I would show prophecies where they'd come true. I would show wisdom that was in the Bible that was useful today. And then I come back and I say, okay, well, giving all of that, can I combat all of that? If I can combat all of that, I'm ready and I'm right. Now, the important thing when you're doing this is to be brutal. Do not be easy on yourself, because your opponents will not be. The outside world will not be. The only way you can do this is to be absolutely brutal on yourself. If I was to do skepticism on atheism, I would not allow, I would not say, okay, well, I'm going to stop at presupposition of God, because if they go up beyond presupposition of God, then it's more difficult. Well, no, you have to take the difficult path. If they do that, what are you going to say? If they say that, what are you going to say? If the other side says that, what are you going to say? If the other guy shows you this, what are you going to say? You have to be as brutal on yourself as possible here. Only then can you truly have true convictions. I can go up against any Christian, any Jew, any believer of any religion. I've done the work, so I know I'm right. Or at least I have a very, very strong conviction that I'm right. Finally, evaluate the behavior on both sides. Are they ready to debate or shut down debate? Now, folks, I have said this many times, but I'll say it again. If you're trying to shut down debate, you're probably wrong. You're probably hiding something. You probably have a real problem. And so when you're looking at both sides, you need to look at who is trying to shut down debate and who is trying to talk and who is trying to debate. And this, of course, comes up wokeism all the time, because, wokeism screams this because wokeism never debates, right? Wokeism says, oh, I'm too big, or I'm too important, or you're too bad, or you're too racist to a debate. That shows you their weakness. That should show you their weakness in great, big, bold letters. If they're not willing to debate, if they're not willing to submit to skepticism, they know they have a flawed argument. Okay, so now we've gone through 2/3 of the presentation already, right? I told you this was going to be brief, and I'm already 2/3 through. Now let's go to some places where you might want to revisit your own skepticism. Now, that's my friends over at The View. Skepticism, when and where to use it. Your religion or politics is obviously the place for you to use religion, to use skepticism the most. Every religion lies and every politician lies. Look for it, find it, and use it. And when one side says something about the other side, go listen to the other side and see what they have to say. Your traditions. Can you say circumcision? There's no reason to continue traditions that are toxic or negative. Apply skepticism to your traditions. Also, apply skepticism, and I can't say this enough, to all mantras. Every single mantra deserves skepticism. That includes January 6th. That includes the Holocaust. Everything. I put The View up here because of an article that I read a little while ago where they were looking for a Republican, but they would only accept a Republican who would not question the election, and they couldn't find one. So they didn't find one. That tells me these ladies cannot discuss January 6th. They have no freaking idea what they're talking about. That in and of itself tells me these ladies are full of shit, because they're shying away, fleeing from due process, fleeing from skepticism. Well, you only flee from skepticism if you can't stand skepticism. They're getting out of the kitchen because they can't stand the heat, and that's what they did. It's not honorable, and it's a huge red flag. Everybody should be worried about that. Anywhere where you or someone else has been denied discussion, if you have been told you can't discuss this because you're the wrong race, you're the wrong color, you're the wrong age, you're the wrong this, you're the wrong that, or whatever, anywhere where someone has a denied discussion, you can't talk about this, that's where you need some serious skepticism, because somebody is hiding something. Somebody is holding back. Somebody is afraid of due process. Somebody's afraid of skepticism. Any discussion that makes you angry just by having it. Why? That's your cognitive dissonance. Anytime you get into somebody questions one of your closely held beliefs and you get angry, that is not okay. That's your brain fighting your brain. And that is the place where you need to sit down and do serious skepticism and find out what is true and what is myth. Any discussion that is prohibited is probably flawed. Okay? And this goes back to the Holocaust discussion that I had a little while ago. Holocaust discussion is prohibited. Well, that's because it's probably flawed. Now, I don't have any data on that. I'm just saying that the fact that they're not allowing discussion on it, they're not allowing debate on it, tells me the argument is weak and will fall if it's faced with skepticism. And that doesn't make me feel good at all. Any discussion where taking one side is compared to stupidity, malevolence, racism, Nazism, or otherwise bad people is pretty much the same point I was making before. Anytime that something like that is used to block discussion, it's being used to block discussion because the person doing the blocking is afraid of engaging in skepticism. That's their cognitive dissonance stopping it. Finally, don't be a pawn. I like this picture of the little pawn that has a king shadow. We don't want to be pawns in our lives, but we are pawns if we don't do skepticism. People who don't do skepticism are not leaders. They are followers by definition. You're being told one thing, and you're saying, okay, boss, and doing that thing. Okay? They're followers. Therefore, if they do that and then they lead, they're still not leaders. They're followers. They're just following down a line. Therefore, people who don't do skepticism regularly should not be leaders in any movement, especially ours. Every leader has the responsibility to do skepticism because followers trust you. Followers trust you to do the skepticism and to have all the information and to make the right decisions because you have the information that they do not. Every leader has the absolute responsibility to do skepticism all the time, every day, as a matter of course. You are not a piece to be moved by misinformation, especially if that misinformation creates benefit to the giver. Everybody go fight those bad guys. They have the gold I want, so they're bad. You're not exhibiting your free will if you do that. You lose free will if you do that. Free will comes from having good information. You can't have free will if you don't have good information. You're just a pawn being moved by the givers of the information. This is why we don't want the government to have any sort of a misinformation board, because that will take away our ability to question the government, and the government lies. So if giving up free will is not an option, then skepticism is not an option. Okay? If giving up free will, if you never want to say, yeah, I'll just give up my free will, then you never want to say, yeah, I'll just give up on skepticism. Because you do not have that will. You do not have that freedom. You do not have that autonomy. If you don't have the information, if you don't have due process, if you don't have free speech, if you don't have debates, open debates, you do not have freedom. You do not have free will. And what happens is people start following leaders that have no clue of what they're doing. The leaders are followers themselves, following without doing skepticism. In a skeptical movement, the leaders are following without doing skepticism even a little bit. When was the last time one of your skeptical leaders actually sat down and listened to the other side? When was the last time one of the atheist movement leaders listened, to a Republican? It doesn't happen anymore because they're not doing skepticism as a matter of course. They're not doing skepticism. It's almost as if skepticism is a bad idea. It's out of vogue because, well, of course, if you apply skepticism to wokeness, it fails. Okay, that's why they abhor debate so much. So this is what I wanted to talk about. I want you to be the king in your chess match. I don't want you to be a pawn. I want you to be in control of your life, and I want you to get that control by never believing me or anyone else without doing skepticism first. Never believing anyone without doing skepticism first. Never believing what you read or what you hear or what you think without doing skepticism first. So you're not a pawn. So you are the king in your chess match. So you have the free will to do what you want to do and to achieve the good and the goals that you want to achieve, not the goals of somebody who is calling information for their own purposes. So What do you think? What did I miss? And tell me about the comments. But tell me in the comments below. I tried to keep this brief. I tried to keep it fast, and I'm pretty sure I failed. But I hope you found this useful. Let me know in the comments section, and have a great day.